Hello, everyone. Welcome to the HireMyVA Team and Business Building Podcast, brought to you by ugozi.com. In this podcast and at HireMyVA, we help you to reclaim your freedom through hiring and thriving with virtual assistants without breaking the bank. And of course, that means your bank. And I'm Dave Braun. I'm here with my partner, fantastic business mentor and coach, but most important, my good and great friend, Larry Broughton. I should say the Larry Broughton. I'm never going to let you live that down, man.
I know you will. Hello, handsome Dave.
How are you? How are you, man?
Doing great. Good.
Awesome.
Listen, the last couple of podcasts, we were talking about confidential work climate surveys.
Yeah.
I think is this part 2 of a 2-parter? Is that right? Or
this is episode 103. It's part 2. The first part was we talked about the why behind doing it, the purpose, right? And we talk about whenever you do anything, make sure you understand the why behind it so you're not wasting your time. And it also makes sure that if you understand the why, you've got better results that'll happen after you're doing the how, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about the why behind doing an employee satisfaction survey or confidential work climate survey, as you mentioned, with your team members. And of course, as Larry, as you point out, and it makes so much sense, we like to use team members, not the word employee, but we're doing it because most people, in the title of this, we put employee because most people search for that.
Right. Well, also, there are times when you have to use the word employee for compliance issues and that sort of thing. So obviously,
True.
So I would encourage folks that don't listen to this podcast as a standalone.
Yes.
Most of these podcasts, you can go and you listen to that one and never listen to another one, and there's a lot of value in it. But go back and listen to episode 102 on why to do it. That's really important. And now we're going to talk about how do you actually do it? Because there will be some folks who are listening and they were a solopreneur and now they've got a couple people on their team and they want to kind of figure out, like, are things really going as I think they're going? Some of these folks will have several hundred employees or team members, and we know that others will have thousands of team members. And so it's a little bit different for each of those. And we can talk about timing of it, I suppose, as well, if you want, David. I can just share what my experience is.
Yeah.
Because we've done it a variety of ways where we've got a few team members and then thousands. So
yeah, we'll share our experiences. Maybe the way we start, Larry, is we talk about mistakes, mistakes to avoid. Right.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch that kind of pop into my mind. Number one, that you have to make sure that people understand that this is confidential.
Yeah.
Right. Because if it's not confidential, then they're not going to give you their honest opinions.
Yeah.
And frankly, even the first couple of times that you say it's confidential, they're not going to give you their honest opinion because people don't trust. Just because you say it's confidential, is it really confidential? And so because they're going to be concerned about some kind of backlash. And so that leads to mistake number 2, is actually having negative ramifications if people give you honest feedback. You can't ask for honest feedback and then reprimand people for giving you honest feedback.
Yeah.
That just builds a real level of contempt and mistrust in an organization. Another one that kind of pops into mind is not letting people know what the results of the survey were, or not listening to them, or even worse, humiliating people who actually did bring things up. But if you ask someone for their feedback and then you never close that feedback loop and say, hey, I heard you and here's what we're going to do, or I heard you and I understand what your goal is or what you want, and we're just not in a position to meet that right now, but it's something that we'll take under advisement moving forward. You have to let them know you heard them. So those are a couple of the mistakes that kind of pop into mind. I'm sure there are plenty of others. Hey, if you guys have been part of a work climate survey before, would love to hear how that went. Give us, some comments in the comment section here. But Dave, do you have other things that kind of pop into mind on mistakes that you've seen made in your past life?
Yeah, let me tailgate on a couple of those. So like one of them, you talk about people will only give you their honest feedback maybe after a couple of them or the third one or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the mistakes that people make, is to not continually doing work climate surveys, not having it part of your culture. So if you do, here's what happens, oh my gosh, all the time. So a company is doing it. Somebody comes in HR and says, you need to do this. They do it. There's a report on it. And then that's the last one that's done for years and years. Right. And so that's a mistake. If you only do one and then drop it, then that's it's like, what are you telling people that you're telling people as an owner or a management team, you're just trying to check off the box, right? Somebody in HR told you that, hey, here's a good idea, you ought to do this. No, that's not it. And then the other mistake is, kind of like related to what you said. Number 3 is not following up. And there's, I think, a really good way to do it, but I'll tell you my experience is when we had one of these, they started following up. They had an all employee meeting.
Yeah.
Here's the results and here's the plan, right? That's great. But then that was it. They may have talked about it the next quarter, but then that was it. Everything else was dropped. Sales were going down a little bit in the quarter. And then it was like panic mode on the leaders. Like, what are we going to do to get these sales up, instead of saying, we got to do this. We got to do both. We got to keep going with it. And what that led to is for people there, it would be like, if they give me another survey, would I really care how I answered? I'd probably just give it lip service.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess that is the mistakes that we're talking about will actually cause your company more harm than good by doing it. If you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all.
Yeah. So the key on doing it right is following up. I mean, there's a lot of other things, but you can't ask for information and then not do something with it.
Yeah, and follow up the right way. And Larry, and I think that the best way to do it as a leader is to put yourself in the position of an employee or a team member who gives you that feedback. What would they want to see? They'd want to see that they were heard, that you're taking it seriously. Taking it seriously means you keep reporting on it until the issue is resolved.
Yeah.
Or at a minimum, telling them that, well, we heard this issue, but there's all these other ones over here that are more important. We'll get to this, but we got to concentrate on these higher level ones first.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, the first time we ever did one of these at my former organization where I was a partner, it was painful the first couple. We were growing very quickly. We didn't build an infrastructure in front of the growth. We were always building after the growth, which is very painful. And after we did the first one, it was, some of it was very personal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say attacks, but pointing out some of the obvious things about, my leadership style that I didn't necessarily like, about my business partner's leadership style. And I remember us both feeling wounded afterwards, but we both had the courage to say, okay, let's go confront this. Let's have a meeting, and not confront it, but let's have a meeting with everyone, do a memo about it. Okay, we heard you. Yes. Okay. All right. Yes, I sometimes come across as selfish, or yes, I may have, an ego problem, or whatever it might be. But you have to take your medicine.
Yeah.
You have to take your medicine, right? And let's remember, sometimes there is such a thing as called icon toppling. Okay, Faith Popcorn, I think, may have coined that years ago. She had a newsletter she used to call the Popcorn Report, and some people have given the shot, or given the opportunity to take a shot at their boss or their leader or their owner, just because of their pain. They may say things that they would never say to your face. And it's even more amplified now with social media, right? I heard a guy named Michael Malice put it this way. He said, hey, I'm from New York. If someone comes up to me on the subway and calls me an idiot and tells me that I'm stupid, I'm not going to put any credit in that. I'm just going to get as far away from them as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how you need to take some of these people that are on social media. Right. Well, you can't necessarily do that with a team member. Right. Because sometimes it is indeed confidential and you don't know who might be saying it. And so you do have to take it in, is there value in this? Is there truth in this? And if there is, own it. If it's not, jettison it and keep moving forward. Right.
Yes. So I think there was a couple of mistakes in that where you were talking about it. One is a mistake as leaders, if we're going into this, if we already have a certain attitude like, well, I can't wait to hear what they say about our company because I think everything is all sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and bunnies. Right. So
Yeah.
you've already got a preconceived attitude. No, you got to go in thinking
Open-minded.
that it's almost like a blank slate. I just want to hear what they say.
Right.
That was one. And then the other one would be feeling too, if there's a lot of negative stuff or some of it, feeling too wounded afterwards to even follow up on it.
Yeah. Well, if it is, then you got to look at that. This is an opportunity. Say, oh my gosh, thank you for identifying that cancer that's in my lung early, that it's just a spot that I can now deal with it. What's the treatment? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
Right. Before they actually come in and rip your lungs out. Right. So I think you got to look at this as an opportunity to grow, to improve. Okay. So it's medicine. And sometimes medicine is bitter and sometimes it's, sweet. You've got to take it. You
Yeah.
got to take it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to improve and if you're going to grow, it's going to hurt sometimes, right? We
Of
go to
course
the
it is.
gym and exercise. I mean, if at some point, if you really want to grow and build muscle or build stamina, it's going to hurt. Your lungs are going to burn. Your muscles are going to ache.
Yeah.
You're going to be sore afterwards. It's going to hurt, but there's a payoff,
Yeah.
right? But you
Absolutely.
got to desire that growth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's some of the mistakes I think that people made.
Yeah.
Maybe we ought to talk about what do you do if you're just a newbie organization and you only got a few people.
Yeah.
Do we go there next?
Well, one other thing I think we ought to point out is I don't know at what point, let's give me your opinion on this because you have a lot more experience than me. At what point in an organization, number of team members would you say I'm going to hire an outside company to do this? And that's really important, is to have somebody outside to do it, because if you don't, people are going to start thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to trace my IP address in my, and how I'm
we've heard that.
and everything and all that, right?
We've heard that.
Yeah.
I would say as soon as you can afford it.
As soon as you can afford it. What do you think would be like the level? Would it be?
Some people are cash rich and some people aren't.
So
You're going to have to decide. There are organizations like SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers.
Uh-huh.
Is that right? Who offer this service, some of the chapters. Our insurance company offered the service. All right. Because they provided a lot of the HR administration on the back end. Okay. So whoever your HR administrator might be, like the people who monitor your team member handbooks and those types of things.
Okay.
And that was just part of their monthly service.
Okay.
For us. So you just got to ask the questions for it. But I would say have an outside person as soon as you can.
Okay.
I mean, even if you've got 3 people on the team. Now, one way to do it, I used to be in a pretty high-end mastermind group where there were a dozen business owners. I think the minimum size business was $5 million. Is that right? That might be right. And so part of the process was that we started implementing is that we would go around business to business and we would audit each other's businesses. Not just do you come and you say, hey, here's my problem is, and you attend your meeting, but we were committed and we would actually start auditing people's business. And the chairperson of the mastermind would conduct the confidential work climate surveys because she had an HR background.
Okay.
Okay. And so she would administer them. Okay. So that's another way to do it. In the early days, I would just ask questions. It doesn't need to be super formal in the early days when you've got 2 or 3, but I would ask for feedback. Like, hey, we've been in business for a year and, you're our 3rd or 2nd team member. And I really would like your feedback. Like, how are things going? Like, really? And if you haven't built a relationship where they feel they can trust you, you're not going to get real feedback from them, but at least you're asking and you're starting to do it. I would encourage you, though, particularly in the early days, reward those people who are trusting you with their lives and their careers early on.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know, thank you for joining my team. Thank you for joining our team. Because I know that you could go work someplace else, but you chose to work with me, to work with us, to grow this organization. when you say things like that, it kind of lowers their guard a little bit. And if you're sincere about it, then they may give you feedback and say, hey, I really want us to grow this thing. I'm hoping that, the three of us that are here in the organization today are here 15 years from now as we grow this thing, but I can't do it by myself. I don't know what's really going on. You're closer to this part of the business than I am. What can we do differently? How can we improve? How can we serve the clients better? How can we serve you better? Just start informally that way. You start building a culture in your organization of that it's a learning organization. It's an organization of honesty and integrity. So I would start there. Ultimately, though, Dave, as I was saying, there are HR firms. I mean, there are, let me back up. There are some insurance companies who will do this for you. There are chapters of SHRM or HR organizations out there that will do this. And there are companies that just administer. I mean, just do whatever online search platform you use, DuckDuckGo or Google or whatever it is, and type in, start doing research for work climate survey administrators, those types of things. You'll find stuff.
Yeah, that sounds good. Now,
I'm sorry. And then so there was an intermediate step for us. We did the verbal stuff. Once we actually hired a VP of HR, we called it People Services. Once we had a VP of People Services, we did administer a couple of them ourselves. But then we did find that people were saying, "Oh, okay, it's coming from a Broughton Hotels URL. You guys are going to know who it is, even just through process of elimination." And so we just got out of it completely.
Yeah, I think
that's what they did. Like the insurance company, they actually would send out reps to each of the hotels. So if you've got 25 different facilities, they would go to them, and they had an English speaker and a Spanish speaker or a Tagalog speaker or a Romanian or wherever they were from, to make sure that people knew. And they just took laptops with them. They used their laptops, and the person came in during a break and sat down and did it, so that we're not tracing IP addresses.
Yeah,
they're all coming from the same place.
Well, you're scanning my fingerprints as I type.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, in between, we're taking fingerprints off the computers. Yeah,
we're taking a picture of you, then the clock, so we can line it all up.
Listen, hopefully hey, if all your team members are feeling that, then we've got a corporate culture problem that we need to deal with. If they really don't trust you that much, we've got a bigger issue to deal with. But yes, I suppose there is a way that you can track everybody if you really wanted to do that. But the key here is you want information that's going to help you become a better organization and a better leader. So does it really matter? I suppose it does. Yes. One of the things, Dave, before we get too far sidetracked, you do have to take into account, when are you given these things? What's going on in the organization? Was there just a leadership or staffing change?
Yeah.
Was there a toxic environment in that department in the months leading up to this, right? You do need to measure all that. And by the way, what we would do is we'd have what hotel were they in and what department. And it was very general, what departments, because some departments only have 2 people in them, right? And so you make it general enough where that you can't figure out who it is, right? And what we would do, depending on the asset that we were acquiring, so let's say we took over a hotel. Sometimes if we knew, because we could tell during the due diligence process of buying it or taking over the management, what the corporate culture was like, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes we would give the confidential work climate survey within the first week of us getting there.
Oh, yeah.
We wanted a benchmark.
That's a good point, yeah.
To start with, right? And then we would do one 6 months later, and then there would be annually after that, okay? If we see people that start getting below a certain score, we start delivering them every quarter. Because what's measured is improved.
That's right.
Right? So really, but that's only valuable if you use it. If you're just doing the surveys and not acting on them like we've talked about already, it's kind of a useless process.
Yeah, I agree. What would you say if you had to pick a couple of questions that you'd want to make sure were on the survey? What do you think? What would be your top couple of questions?
Do they have the tools to do their job effectively? I would do some questions around trust. Do I trust my manager, leader, whatever? Do I understand the vision and mission of the organization?
Okay.
If so, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those types of things I think are very important. I think I mentioned this in previous podcasts. We had about 45-ish questions in ours. We try not to have very much fluff in
Yeah.
them. But things about if you were offered a job somewhere else, would you take it? Again, because we're trying to build a corporate culture here, right? If you were ill, do you feel like your supervisor or team members would visit you in the hospital? What's that trying to get to? The level of camaraderie and love in an organization, right? So those tend to be the things that kind of pop out right away. Yeah. And depending on what's going on in the organization, oftentimes the first one that you do might be a little more general. Excuse me, I got to take a drink here. Sorry.
That's okay. So in other words, it might be more general, but then as I think what you're saying is as you discover, maybe some issues that you need to hone in on, it's like, well, wait a second, here's some general issues. We're not living out our core values or whatever.
Right.
We need to have a few more questions to figure out some of the specifics, right?
That's right.
What are some of the specifics that are happening? Is it, and try to get it, is it an immediate supervisor? Is it from the top? Is it one of the core values? Is it a location? So that kind of thing.
That's right. And then, sorry about the voice.
I know this subject really chokes you up. It does me too.
Then ultimately, you want the same questions every time so that you can benchmark it. You can track yourself against each of those.
Yeah. So I guess then what you're saying is you would continue to ask those same questions, but maybe would you add a few as well, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is this employee satisfaction survey or work climate survey is not necessarily just a static thing that you're going to ask every single time, right?
No.
It's something
like right now, I would do one that pertains to the pandemic. Yeah. Right. Do you feel safe?
That's a good one.
In your workplace.
Yeah, I know that like another one that people would ask would be like, do you feel like productive when you talk about the tools? Do you have the tools at home to do your job, or do you feel productive on working from home? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being best, would you rather keep working at home, or would you rather come in the office, or stuff like that, right? That are related to the times going on.
That's right.
And I think one of the things you talked about was important about the timing of it, right? If you've got a company that all of a sudden you've got a windful of money and you're like feeling really generous and you give everybody bonuses, well, then the next day you drop the survey on them. It's going to be a little skewed, right?
Yeah.
So don't do, that's kind of a mistake. So don't do stuff like that.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
So I think we answered that. How do you actually do this? So we talked about what to do if you're a small organization, kind of do it yourself, just through informal conversations. As you grow and you get an HR professional, have them administer it. But I would recommend, Dave, that as soon as you can afford to have an outside organization administer it on your behalf, to do that, because it builds the level of trust in the organization. So how else do you do it? We talked about timing on when you would do that. Maybe you start out doing one now. If you're into mergers and acquisitions, you do it upon or within 6 months of the first, of the merger, and then do it annually after that. I would not let it go longer than 12 months. A whole lot can change in an organization in 12 months, right? If things are not going so well, consider doing it quarterly or every 6 months, right? And we talked about some of the important questions. Yeah. How to do it. And then just make sure, how do you communicate the results? Okay.
And continue to follow up.
Yeah. Continue to follow up. Now, what we've done, or what I've done, sometimes we've done full on team meetings, particularly with managers and leaders, and then with memos afterwards. Since the advent of Zoom, we've been using Zoom for years, even prior to the pandemic. We would talk about the results in my quarterly state of the company addresses, so that anyone who wants to get on there can see it, and then give some of the highlight reels and action items in the form of a memo.
Yeah.
To every team member, every stakeholder.
And I think it's good to share both when I say the good and the bad, right?
Sure, of course.
You want to share the good things that are going on in your organization. And yeah, I think, and I love your idea of continuing to do it and making sure you ask similar questions and charting those over time. If you share that with people, you might find that, hey, you've been on a good trajectory, but then all of a sudden, there's a dip, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's easy to have happen. And it's better to make
reality.
sure you understand that reality is your friend, like you say, right? It's better to understand that you've got this little dip, and then you can be like, we're going off the rails here. We better do something about it.
Yeah. So obviously share the good with your team and your stakeholders, whether you've got partners, investors, whatever, because those are victories, right?
Yeah.
And share the bad and the ugly as opportunities. They're only opportunities if you put action plans
behind them
with them or behind them, right? And then follow up to make sure those are done, because those can turn into victories. It's very interesting. I'd mentioned, I don't remember, was this podcast or the previous one, about the whole idea of dust wands.
Yeah, it was a previous one. You mentioned the dust wands.
I talked about room attendants at a hotel that we had acquired were always getting beat up by guests and by their former manager, that there was dust on the top of picture frames and on ceiling fans.
Yeah.
So we asked them, do you have the tools to do your job? And if you don't, what tools would you need? And they said, we'd love to have collapsible, expandable dust wands. How much of an investment was that? Under $100 to get every room attendant their own dust wand. And all of a sudden they felt great about it. Morale goes up because they know they're going to be doing a better job. Guest satisfaction scores go up, complaints go down, efficiencies go up. Oh my gosh, what's the great value of that? And so by us doing that within the first couple of months, then the room attendants, all of a sudden, we are heroes to them because we listened to them. Right?
That's awesome.
So just because it's a problem doesn't mean it's not an opportunity to turn into a victory.
Yeah. So give your team members the option to be able to give the suggestions of like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being best, this is a 5. Well, if that's a 5, what would you do to help get it up to a 10?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right.
Good.
Whew, that was pretty awesome.
Well, good. I'd like to hear from the listeners or the viewers, if you're on YouTube, what has worked for you in the past? Have you done work climate surveys, confidential work climate surveys, or employee surveys? On either side, have you been on the receiving end, or have you been on the administration side? What are good questions that you've heard? What lessons have you learned?
Yeah.
From these things? I'd love to hear it. Share it in the community if you're part of our HireMyVA or Victory community as well. If you're thinking about administering one of those, these ask questions there. We'd glad to help you out however we can.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to take a look at what you come up with. Be awesome.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Remember, building a team is the way to reclaim your freedom. One of the ways to build your team right is to do work climate surveys, as we talked about. Well, of course, as you've heard, and if you're in our community, you know that we are here to help you, especially with our course and community, and of course, our white glove service, where we find a rockstar VA for you. So 3 things we'd love for you to do, and we'd really appreciate it. Number 1, subscribe to this podcast with your phone. And subscribe on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and click on the little bell next to it to get reminders. Number 2, give us a rating. Obviously, we want 5-star, but give us a rating. Put a comment, as Larry mentioned. Let us know some of your experiences with a work climate survey and what happened. This will all help us to get the word out. And then number 3 is go to HireMyVA.com for more information on our course and community and our amazing white glove service. Remember, even without experience, you'll learn how to prepare for, hire, and thrive with virtual assistants. And Larry and I have helped a lot of folks. We want to continue helping more. So come on and join us. Come into our Q&As. Let us answer your questions, and we're going to help you grow as a person and as an organization. Just to get started on that, go to HireMyVA.com for more information.
Yeah, and again, this podcast is brought to you by ugozi.com, which is really our online learning portal, offering bite-sized nuggets of learning for entrepreneurs, leaders, and high achievers. We have a moral obligation to serve our teams and to serve our communities. We can't do this alone. All right, we're all on this journey together. For Dave and I, and for many of you, we have a higher power that we answer to. All right, we are stewards of our businesses.
Yep.
So I'm going to offer you this. God bless you, God keep you, and God hold you. Now go do something significant today, my friends. Okay, go get them. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
See you next time.